And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook on this Tuesday, May 28, 2024. And this outlook is for the midweek period, Wednesday and Thursday. We have an area of weakening low pressure that will be located just north there of the eastern Aleutians, tip of the Alaska Peninsula Wednesday morning. Little weak frontal system, secondary low trying to form, but of moisture and things that are left along the Gulf Coast. We will have IFR conditions there along the northern northwestern Gulf Coast off the Kenai all the way back toward Yakutat. Also IFR conditions along the North Slope Arctic coast persistent down through areas of the Bering Strait, and then areas of IFR over the southeastern as well as southwestern part of the Bering Sea. There is going to be another low coming up in here into the far western Aleutians with some wind and lower ceilings. And then by the time we get into Wednesday afternoon, this theme will see MVFR conditions, some improvement over the Wrangell, St. Elias Mountain, southeast mainland, Copper River Basin by Wednesday afternoon. But some scattered showers, even isolated thunder popping up with the daytime heating up there near and west of the Yukon Flats, 40-mile gold country. Back to the west, IFR conditions here in through the Bering, St. Matthew down through the Pribilof Islands and way out toward the west. Also, again, along the Arctic coast, north slope, some lower cloud cover, some areas of fog, lower ceilings as a result. And for Thursday morning, we find some IFR redeveloping along just off of the northern Gulf Coast up into maybe eastern Prince William Sound, but generally VFR conditions along the Yukon River Valley. And up here along the North Slope, Arctic coast, the IFR conditions will prevail, and we find a broad area of IFR conditions out over the central and southeast Bering, along and just north of the eastern Aleutians, and then way out to the west, the western half of the Aleutians there falling under IFR conditions with that low and frontal system pushing in. And then Thursday afternoon, we find IFR conditions out over the Gulf, just off of the Panhandle coast with MVFR conditions. Overall, we're just going to see some showery weather on and off, and this is going to continue in the weekend because over the weekend we have another low come up out in the North Pacific in this fashion and another low working its way eastward across the lower Bering. So the weather pattern is going to remain active for southern areas of the state back into the Aleutians. And with the daytime heating on Thursday, there could be some more scattered showers or even isolated thunder, especially across areas of the interior. And just keep that in mind because this pattern is going to hold here going in through the first week of June. Looking at what we have for Wednesday, Anaktuvik Pass, generally VFR, but if you're flying further north toward the North Slope, you're going to run into IFR north of the north entrance. And for Adigan Pass, same thing. Generally VFR conditions expected Wednesday, but as you fly farther north of the north entrance, you're going to encounter IFR over the North Slope and Arctic coast. Lake Clark, we're looking at VFR becoming MVFR as we go into Wednesday, midday afternoon. Merrill Pass, generally VFR conditions as we round up through Rainy Pass and Windy Pass. We're expecting VFR conditions on Wednesday. And then further east, Isabel and Mentasta passes should generally keep some MVFR conditions. There could be some scattered showers pop up, especially as we get into the afternoon and evening hours. Tanita Pass, generally VFR is expected there through the pass, though. North of there, you could run into some areas of MVFR. And then to the south, Portage Pass will see widespread MVFR in the morning give way to VFR conditions, but the east side, their entrance as you get out into western Prince William Sound will generally be MVFR. And then finally, in the far northern part of the Panhandle, look for VFR at both Chilkoot and White. Freezing levels at the surface. We have colder air, a pocket of colder air over eastern Russia, St. Lawrence, this Gulf of Anadyr. But as we go aloft, there's a little bit of warmer ridging that extends into the Yukon Valley. We have some freezing levels aloft above 6,000 feet. And so there's a little bit of ridging there, northwest Canada, weak axis pushing into the central interior. Otherwise, freezing levels aloft are kind of low along the northeastern Gulf Coast. And also out here over the Bering, eastern central Aleutians, freezing levels aloft are generally running at or below 2,000 feet. And the threat of icing on Wednesday, there's a little weak frontal system associated with the low that's sitting here over the southeast Bering. We could find some moderate Icing potentially above 4,000 and above 6,000 feet from around areas surrounding Bristol Bay down in the northern parts of the Alaska Peninsula. Perhaps Kodiak Island and there a bit southward. Also a pocket of moderate icing possible around Prince William Sound above 6,000 feet. And then back way to the west with a low and frontal system approaching the western Aleutians above 8,000 feet. Upper level jet stream winds, we have a core, a belt of winds, west-southwest winds upwards of 100, 105 knots well south of the Gulf in the North Pacific. And then behind me, this troughiness that lingers here out over the eastern Bering. We have on the backside of that, cutting across the central Aleutians, a jet core of 135 to 140 knot northwesterly winds. At 9,000 feet, 700 millibars, belt of winds 30, 45 knots, stays well south of the Gulf in the North Pacific. There is southeasterly flow over the southwest mainland, 35 to 40 knots, and then way out to the west again, west of the western Aleutians, we find some winds of 50 to even as high as 70 knots. And then at 3,000 feet, the really only notable winds that we have impacting areas of the mainland, we have east-southeast lower level winds there around the entrance of Cook Inlet to perhaps as high as 40 knots coming up at west there of Kamishak Bay, and then along east of Nunavik Island, maybe upwards of 35 knots with this low circulation here. But then back to the west, that little stronger low, it does have a belt of winds that kick upwards of 50 to 70 knots, but still well southwest of the western part of the Aleutians. And as a result, we'd expect at least some moderate turbulence pushing into the western Aleutians on Wednesday afternoon, surface to 3,000 feet, and then potentially some moderate turbulence in areas of the southwest from the entrance of Cook Inlet up toward Lake Iliamna, and also around the north end of the Alaska Peninsula and around the coastal areas there of Bristol Bay, surface to 4,000 feet.